So it's that time of the year again. We're in the home stretch of the school year for a lot of people. I guess, some people are kind of trying to crawl across the finish line. Other parents are like, we're almost there, ready to be triumphant. And everybody's kind of finding themselves in a different place. So how did you guys, with the end of the school year, how did that look in your families?
Even if you school year round, there's a point at which you have to have the end of that grade, right? Whether it's 9 months or it's a whole year. And I think anytime I'm about ready to end something, I get really nervous. I get like,
because it's going to change.
There's a whole nervous thing, and are we ready to be to call it good?
Yeah.
Did I
do a good enough job?
Then I'm evaluating everything that's come behind, no matter whether it's related to school or not. But if there's a final cutting off point, you think, oh my goodness. And I think we should name it or something, because I think there's like this teacher in the headlights thing that's like, and it freaks people out. And we've talked to a lot of families who do that.
Ruth, you did school year round.
Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah, I did.
I think a lot of people do though.
Not
anymore.
everything though.
Yeah.
It was, it wasn't full task, but there were a couple of things that I felt like needed to
I'd be
continue.
curious how many nowadays stop. How many go
let
on?
us know.
Yeah, we definitely stopped. We were busy in the summers doing a lot of church things, Bible schools, camps, and big yard sales every summer. So we took a break, but then we kind of focused on more life skills during the summer.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea too.
I think a lot of it is, so dependent on the style of the family, what they have going on in the summer. If there's lots of camps and trips and things like that, it's kind of hard to keep going in the summer.
Right.
But maybe, even if you keep going in the summer, no matter what, I think usually there's a shift. It relaxes some, and there's more hands-on and more field trips and more fun. So it's kind of like you're changing it up, even if you're still learning, because as homeschoolers we never quit learning, right? We're always teaching our kids something.
And it's usually at this time of the year where I would find myself excited, we're on track, we're going to end when I want, and then there were some years where I was like, oh, this is painful.
What in the world happened?
And even you could get discouraged. So just saying, from being there, don't get discouraged. Sometimes you just have to sit down and evaluate. Where am I?
Yeah.
Where do I need to get?
Yeah.
Because if you aim for nothing, you hit it every time.
Yeah.
So where do we need to go?
What are the core things that we need to really focus on? Are there some things I can cut out?
Yeah.
And of course, math and language arts are going to be those things that you really do have to, they build.
Yeah.
So
Their skills.
finding a way
Very
to get
much
those
so.
in is important.
Yeah. And I think as the teacher, it's really helpful to look at what was accomplished, because a lot of times I would focus on
The
what we
negative.
did and what was not done, or where you're not good. And me too, where I failed, rather than
What's been
what
accomplished?
did we accomplish? Let's celebrate that.
Yes.
And then, the progress that happened.
Yeah.
So,
And we're just harder on ourselves. I'm a firstborn, so I tend to kind of set the
We didn't know
bar
that,
just a
Amber. We
little
never
high.
could tell that you're.
and
I am too,
You
though.
set the bar high. That's a good thing.
and sometimes though that can be stressful. There can be tears on my part, tears on my kids' part.
Yeah.
And one year, we were fostering, kind of like we were guardians of my husband's sister. So I had a high schooler and I had third grade 4 kids,
Wow. Big
within 5
difference.
years.
To juggle.
Big
And
difference.
that was the year that I almost quit. I was like, I just can't
do it.
do this anymore. And Brianna, our oldest, I took her to the school and I said, well, I'm thinking about putting her in the school because I don't know if I can do this anymore. And they evaluated her and she was 2 grades ahead. And so then
Look
I
at
was
that.
like, well, why am I being so hard on myself?
You were doing better than you thought you were.
Sometimes we just are harder on ourselves than we need to give ourselves a little bit of a break. And the expectation that we set, is that even reasonable? Are you happy?
Right.
Is your child happy?
Yeah.
And if, because your relationship is important in homeschooling,
It
you need
is.
to make sure that we don't
lose focus of that in the whole.
Right.
Well, we were talking a little about this yesterday, and I told you guys, I would often find myself at the end of the year becoming a drill sergeant and kind of like, do this right now. You have to get it done. And the kids are like, okay. And everybody's so stressed out. And it's like, that's not really how you want to end the school year. You want to end on a high note. And even if you're transitioning into summer, you don't want to go into summer with everybody just, really stressed out. So I think these are such good points of taking a step back, evaluating what did go well, and let's give thanks for that and be grateful, and even celebrate some of those things. Like,
absolutely,
what was your favorite, book you read this year, and letting the kids kind of speak into, what they really enjoyed this year, and bringing some fun, positive things out at the end of the year.
And it's a good time to evaluate this program. Did the children learn well with this program, even if I didn't like it? Did they do well with it? And
that's
we're
a good
going
distinction,
ahead.
right?
Yeah.
Because I already had math grade 4, right? And so sometimes it's about what worked best for that child, and maybe I need to adapt on the teaching method a little bit to that. So
I think laughter's good medicine. So if you can find ways to bring that laughter in at the end of the school year, then, and it might be through something like even getting some joke books, like let your kids tell jokes after dinner and laugh as a family. Set the tone that way, or do Mad Libs. There's some fun Mad Libs out there that just get everybody laughing. But teaching those remaining lessons with a joyful spirit, it can be so hard as a mom or dad or, any teacher. You're kind of just looking at that end and going, we just have to get there. But taking the focus off that and just really appreciating and enjoying the time that's left.
I've talked to some families who put together an end of the year portfolio for their kids, and actually had the kids choose.
Yeah.
And no matter the grade, because some college programs will want an art portfolio, for example, but those lower grades are a really neat thing to do, and see. So that the child can see, I really learned a lot, or this was enjoyable, or what did I like best, and I've really progressed.
It's such a visual reminder of that progress, and it becomes a keepsake that you can look at, next year and go, I forgot I did that last year. I really loved that,
I know that there are schools and states that require you to turn in everything, and we're not excluding that sort of situation.
There's always the state standards you have to make sure
you need to
you're
look
meeting.
at your look at the HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. See what you're You need to hold your standard there.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to put yourself in jeopardy as a homeschooler.
Yeah.
Right.
But am I meeting my state's criterias, if they have any, and then what criterias do I have for my kids, or what holes do I see them having, and what could we work on maybe during the summer, in the heat of the day, or something like that, where you could have some inside time. Did we finish science and history? Well, what could we do through the summer, maybe as a unit study, to go over some of those things, or where are some places we could visit?
Right.
And
make it more hands-on. So maybe you've got some science or history to finish up, and you can read it while you're at the pool. Or you can read it in the car on the way to wherever you're going in the summer. So I think there are fun ways so that, it doesn't have to look the same in the summer. You can still get that remaining stuff in, the core stuff that you really need to have, but do it in a fun way. Change it up. Do it on the trampoline. Do it on,
go to the park.
A picnic, something like that.
Kids love change.
Right.
Yes.
I do too.
Some don't.
Yes,
They kind of no, I have to do it here all the time. But
Well, and
others
just being outdoors.
everybody, get your math book and jump in the car. What are we doing?
Yeah.
You're like, you'll find out. Just get your math book and jump in the car and then go do something.
Just that alone, just something different.
Yeah, and my kids we call them slushies, but and then we'd stop and get a slushie, and I know that's not healthy for them, but what a motivator! My kids did a
That
lot
red
of work
food
for
coloring.
that.
Did you do the red food coloring,
Oh
Amber?
boy, it was worth it. No, but they would help do a lot of things, and we're like, let's go get a
That was
slushie.
motivating for them, though.
Oh yeah, or an
they
ice
looked
cream
forward to it.
cone or something, and it made it special. Okay, so now to this day, they're 25 down to 20. And if
still
we
want
do
their
a
slushies?
project at the house, they'll say, okay, so
Where's the
I'm like,
slushies?
all right, get
Where's
in the
the
van,
slush?
everybody. Isn't that funny? And then we have to take multiple cars now because we've got additions to the family. And it's just funny. We just sit there and laugh and go, that was a memory that was made when we were homeschooling that they still when we get together, they want to share that because it was a fun.
It's sweet.
Yeah.
It's something that they have held on to. Yeah.
And it was a happy moment, and they want to relive that again.
Well, and finding little incentives like that. And it might be something completely different, but what what motivates your kids, and finding something that is going to help them go, okay, I can apply myself a little better because I know that that's coming at the end.
Sure.
And it might just be swimming or something like that you can do,
Well, I see summer as an opportunity to explore things and try new things. Now, one of the reasons we did school through summer, but it wasn't the normal at all. But the two skills, the math skills, for our family, we needed to keep
up
those,
with that.
And that's a legit
fresh.
thing.
Yeah.
Some kids do need to touch that more often.
Yeah.
And not
And
forsake it for 2 months.
that was helpful. It was a shortened lesson. We didn't do the same way that we did it during the year. And then we were reading all the time and signing up for every book club thing that we could sign up for.
Right.
And to me, that felt like two ways that we could keep those two skills that are mandatory for so much through the year fresh, and then, and we also lived off of our garden quite a bit. And so we had to be doing that.
That's such a perfect opportunity for learning in the summer. I mean, all of those opportunities with being outdoors and gardening and all of the things that, come along with that. I think if kids are outside, they don't feel, it's a different kind of learning. They don't feel like they're doing school. They just feel like it's real life skills.
Well, it's something that's missing in our culture right now, too, being outdoors so much.
Yeah,
And,
definitely.
it's an important thing.
Yeah.
And that whole experiencing it, learning about it, but also all of the somewhat risky. I'm writing
Climbing the tree.
Writing an article right now about that, the risky play that we in our modern culture don't get it.
Well, we struggle with that as moms. I don't know how many times my kids would start, especially my boys, start climbing up those tall trees, and I'm like, guys,
Oh my
get
goodness.
down,
Yeah.
But then there's a part of me going, it's good for them, but that balance of figuring out where to let them be a little risky, and where to draw back can be hard.
Summer I found to be a good time to do things that we just didn't have time for.
Yeah.
Within the
Busy
school year.
Got some examples?
We did. Some of the traditions that we did was we would use summertime to do more of a deep clean of the rooms of our school areas, and then organize. Like we didn't have that time as much, or I would get distracted by that, and it would take away from a school day.
Right.
So. And like organize the homeschool life book here week by week. That was a great resource for moms now.
Kind of
I like to
resetting
have like a checklist, and we would go through the closets. We would go through and organize together. That also teaches your kids how to be a little bit more organized. And anything that was extra, we would have a garage sale. And my kids really got the entrepreneur spirit, having garage sales and lemonade stands.
They get excited
and
making $1 off of that little toy that,
And they want to know when we're having our garage sale this summer. So
it's at the first time you said that, I was like, that doesn't sound like fun. But I think that fun is if when you're able to do something and accomplish it, that can be fun, right? And so being able to learn through the school year and show your accomplishments and grow and make that comfort zone area of yourself feel more bigger and bigger that you're able to accomplish, that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And learning
see the
things like
results.
how to swim,
Yeah.
how to go fishing.
Yeah.
We didn't, I grew up fishing. My husband did not. So he was in the middle of California and just never really grew up doing
Not
that.
a lot of opportunity there.
I said, it's not that hard. Let's just go get some worms. And one of my, the oldest one, our daughter, we just got back from Florida. And what did she have to do in Florida? She had to go fish.
Yeah.
Got herself a license in Florida
That's
and
great.
everything.
That's great.
And caught fish that I'm not used to seeing. And, because that's a talent though that you have to learn.
It's a kind of life skill.
experiment.
Yeah.
How do I figure out how to catch a fish? And
Yeah.
how do I hook it and all that good stuff. How do I
Right.
swim? Some homeschool families that I knew, the kids didn't know how to swim at all.
Yeah.
And so finding someone with maybe a pool or somewhere and teaching some of those life skills, social skills, how to handle yourself
So
in
many
different environments, having
opportunities.
people over, doing just the fun things where they are learning some of the social etiquette as well.
Right.
that are
It's a good
important.
opportunity for that. Yeah. Well, I know a lot of times in our family, we'd get toward the end of the year and the kids would start getting antsy, and I was getting antsy. And, the earth is calling to you outside. Everything's waking up and it's so pretty. And so one thing we did that I felt was really helpful, and I think the kids loved, was we would keep like a summer adventure book. And so I would ask the kids, okay, well, as soon as we're done with this, we're going to talk about summer, and we just maybe take 15 minutes and let every kid talk about, okay, what are some things that you really want to do this summer? And I would write them down. Oh, you
love
really
this
want to have a
idea.
lemonade stand?
Goal setting,
Okay.
so you have a reason to
right,
accomplish what you.
Right, exactly.
We might not get
right
it all done, but let's try to.
Yep. Let's
to do these.
brainstorm.
Yeah.
And the things that they would throw out would sometimes surprise me. It would just be little things sometimes, like, oh, I really want to catch fireflies this summer because we keep saying we're going to do it every year and we haven't done that. So let's make sure. And by writing it down, they kind of feel like even though we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure we get some of these things in. And I think everybody starts to feel excited.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little daydreaming and a little bit of planning. And that little summer book it serves you well later on in the summer. You can go back to it and say, oh, we said we were going to make banana splits on the deck, and we're going to do that,
Promises,
and then every child gets to speak into it something they think is important.
Right.
Because, what's really fun for your first grader might not be what your fifth grader is really looking forward to. So
Summer's a good time to go visit some people that mean a lot to you as well.
sure.
That's a good
And we would try to take, since I was able to stay home, and we had load up the kids and we'd go to grandma's house for a week.
Yeah.
And during their Bible school, or just to hang out and do a project.
Yeah.
Grandpa needed a project done. Okay, let's go help Grandpa. And we
That's
maybe
awesome.
we're not always as helpful as, but the camaraderie, the hanging
That's more
out,
important.
the learning from the older generation is important for our kids. Grandparents are very special, and if you still have grandparents in your kids' lives, making them a priority on both sides of the family is really key. Hearing their
Absolutely.
stories. Hey, Grandpa, what did you do?
Absolutely.
Tell me when you got in trouble in school. You know, and they just love to sit and listen to stories.
They do.
Because it's a connection to them.
Well, and sometimes I think they don't know how much they don't want to tell us all those things unless they think we really want to hear them.
Exactly.
So they're not going to say, hey, let me tell you all these stories. Maybe they do.
They come out more when you are together and doing things often.
Yeah.
I want to ask you guys, when we've had some people call in and we talk to families, what about that person that's like, we got sideswiped this year and I am not where we thought we should be. What are some suggestions for that, and how do you handle that? I mean, exclusive of state demands and things, but this this filling in the gap. That there's a gap, and things just didn't go the way I really thought they ought to. Do you guys have some suggestions along those lines?
Well, I think definitely, like even with your body will protect always its core. And so what is the core that we know the kids really need?
The math and language
The
arts.
math and language arts, everything kind of builds off of those. And so
So
evaluating where those are.
If
How
some-
can we
if something
salvage
needs
those?
to slide, are you saying
And is there
that
some
those
review?
don't slide? Those
Right.
are the ones.
I would try to keep those up, or at least look ahead. Next year, they're going to need to know their addition
you go.
facts. So we're going to build off of that. So I do really need to make sure we shore those up somehow.
Yeah.
So
or-
it's not necessarily about the end of this level so much at that point. It's more about where we need to be,
Sure.
that next step
Right.
in the next grade, right?
Yeah.
Because depending on your curriculum, the curriculum we used did a lot of reviewing at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And
that's the
so when I looked
traditional way.
ahead, there was a couple life happened years where it's like, okay, where do I need to be? And then some of that extra review with the kids, I would say, as long as, how about in math, you do the even numbers and and you can skip the odd, but if you miss an even number, you owe me an odd number.
Hey.
So sometimes they'd be like, I'm going to pay better attention to what I'm doing.
And of course, that depends on your curriculum, because you can't do that in every
right. And our curriculum spiraled, so I knew that it would get hit again next year.
Yeah.
But where will there be a hole if we don't get that covered? And we usually were able to finish, but with the girl my sister that we took care of, my sister-in-law, we were going to put her into the school where my husband was being,
so
so you knew you had a deadline, kind of.
Well, she was tested. We wanted to put her into, he was a youth pastor, and they had a school, and we wanted to put her into the school, but they tested her, and instead of being 6th grade level, honor student in the state that we came from, she was actually 3rd grade level in this curriculum.
She had a lot
and
of
they were
catching
going
up to
to
do.
and they wanted to put her in 3rd grade. So we cannot do that. So we
huge,
used that summer to tutor, and we tutored only language and math, and I used easy grammar, and then we used some math. I don't exactly remember what I did with math, but we worked on some math, and then we actually started homeschooling. So I started homeschooling when my kids were very little with her. And that's when we started with her. And so summer that year was more of a tutor, get ready for.
So you're looking at your goals for that child and maybe even the child's goals sometimes, depending on their age.
Right.
And then seeing, well, how can we get there? Maybe even I might need to pull in something else, right? That might help get us to the end, or get us to at least a solid stepping stone for the next step.
And she's so resilient and caught on. She just needed to be given the stones to step on.
Exactly.
I think it can really depend on your kids.
I like that
too.
metaphor. Ruth approved metaphor.
I think it can really depend on your kids.
Absolutely.
I mean, I feel like every summer was a little different for us. And some of my kids that struggled a little bit more, I had one that struggled more with learning issues. And for him, it was absolutely critical to keep doing reading and phonics in those years, and even math, because he had issues with remembering, and so we needed to review very often, and so taking 2 or 3 months off would have been like losing the whole year. So I do think depending on your kids, and with your family what works, but for some kids I think it is much more important with those core areas to keep going, and you can still just weave it into a fun summer schedule. It doesn't have, it can be something you do first thing in the morning, and then you have the rest of the day, or like I said, maybe you weave it in while you're in transport somewhere, you're headed somewhere. But
and I think this is a particular instance where you getting a mentor for you, getting at least a sounding board. Like, here's what I'm thinking about doing.
Right.
That's really important.
helpful,
I think, Amber, you've mentioned that before.
Yeah. I do like that. Finding somebody who's older than you, who's done it longer than you, and actually has a good success rate with their kids. I didn't find that as much with my peers. Sometimes I felt like my peers were more like, why are you doing that? Or you should do this. It was more,
well, we're in the same boat.
Exactly.
Right? You want somebody who's
I want to see someone who's finished across the finish line and has a good relationship with their kids and had the balance. So those were the tightest moms or the mentor moms of homeschool that would be worth sitting down and talking to and saying, what advice would you give me? And they're full of advice. They just don't think anyone wants to listen.
Sure.
So finding them, there's a good gleaning the wisdom of years from someone else. What things should I worry about? What things am I stressing myself out with that I shouldn't?
Yeah.
And getting some advice from an older
You get a
mom.
new pair of eyes looking at it. And that's what people tell us when they call. And just that's the ministry side of
and
ours.
we're kind of the older moms now.
we are.
I've been the older mom
Oh my
for a long
goodness.
time. It's my gray hair.
I don't want to admit that,
But just being sometimes understanding the situation, but being removed from the situation can really provide some help and perspective.
Yes.
You know,
absolutely.
And then just somebody to say, hey, you're doing a great job.
Right.
I was so excited. We had
encouraged.
a lady that I had talked to the year before, and she had pulled her son out of school. He was 5th grade. He was not reading at all. And she had a plan. She actually did me the blessing of calling the next year and saying, guess what?
Letting you know.
We got to 5th grade reading.
That's so
and
awesome.
he was so excited, and we just kind of had a party there on the phone. But what an accomplishment.
Right.
That kid and the mom, the family had all worked together to meet those goals.
Yeah.
And then they were on to the next goal.
I think it's worth saying what that book was that you suggested. Because someone else might want to use it with Pathway.
We'll tag
Was
it,
the
okay?
Pathway
I want to
phonics
make,
or something?
Pathways, and then there was the other one with the guy on the back
I
looking
think
up.
that brings up a good point
There was
too.
Yeah.
Is I think as parents, as we think about the summer and we think about each child, sometimes there are very specific goals that we know.
Right.
We've watched
That's
kind
an
of through the year.
example.
We didn't have time to address it, but like maybe this child's really struggling with some social anxiety or some issues with talking to people. And I think it's such a good time to say, hey, you know, for each of my kids, maybe I've got a different goal.
Yeah.
And it can be something
An
like that.
atypical,
We're going to practice having people over and talking
maturing
and our
goal.
etiquette and our social skills or whatever that looks like. But I know I had one that I encouraged to do the musicals and the plays because she was very shy.
Yeah.
And so she didn't want to, but I knew that if I gave her just a little push, she'd love it. And so, you know, it was a good time for that because we didn't always have time during the school year, but in the summer there's a lot of that stuff going on and you have a little bit more time. So thinking about that, what are those things I feel like really I need to see growth in my kids or I want to help them, you know, accomplish.
Getting on the same page with your spouse too, or whoever you're working with, and having those goals. And during the
Very
summer,
important.
we
Very important.
you and I we were talking about how we just really appreciated the nap time.
I'm a
That
big
carried
fan
on.
of siestas, man.
Hey,
Big fan.
sounds good to me.
And that's
Just
a good
quiet
time
time. You don't have to go to
Quiet
sleep,
time.
right?
Yeah.
But you can be reading your
The
book.
downtime.
And we have some workbooks actually that are great for even during the summer. They're literally called our summer learning.
Yeah, I love these.
And these are great because some of them only
Summer
take like
bridge.
15 minutes, and you could keep your kids'
I like this one.
activities going
We'll
on.
link some
Yeah.
below.
Summer
Well,
brain
it's nice
quest,
because you
all
have
these-
maybe 1 or 2 pages a day, and it's
Right,
going to keep your brain
it's not
active.
gonna stress you out.
Keep you kind of up to date, remembering what you learned last year, but bridging you into the next grade, which is nice so it will be less stressful transition later.
Right.
One of these has a poster too.
Yeah, I
This
saw
one
that.
covers
That's
a little
neat.
bit of science and social studies, along with all of them seem to cover
Just
reading,
keeping
writing,
those
Reading and
math.
math. Yeah,
Keeping them
some
sharp.
Yeah.
Keeping
one of
those
them had a
sharp.
cooking project and some different things in there. And one thing I think is important is that, you know, we're looking toward, okay, here's all the things we could do and that's all great. But leaving time for your kids to have board time. I mean, we almost don't
Can
want
we
to hear that in the
clap on that
summer,
one?
like,
Which
oh,
turns
I'm
into
bored, Mom.
creative.
But what do they say? Boredom is the mother of creativity. So
Yes.
leaving that time and looking forward to time where it is that downtime where they can go and they can just find things to do. Because kids need to be bored. They
Yes.
need to have
I'd
that
like
time.
to be bored too.
I know. Me too. I don't get that time very often. But you know what? We don't have as much time for creativity, but we don't want to rob our kids of that because we know as adults how often do we have that time. And so in their childhood, they need that time to be creative and be bored and just think, what should I do?
Let them fill that time.
Yeah,
rather
exactly.
than us filling the time for them.
So leaving time for all that, you know, just downtime. Have 2 or 3 hours maybe in the afternoon a couple times a week where we're not scheduling anything. I want you to go outside and find something to do.
Well, I hope that with all these ideas, we haven't sent you to needing a nap time. But we'd love to hear what you guys think and give us a call.
Do you school year round? Do
Yeah.
you take a break?
How do you do this?
love to hear,
life that you've chosen.
Everybody's family is so unique.
Yes.
It's always fun
and,
to.
I
and
love
the
hearing
reality
the ideas.
is we get 18 summers.
Dude,
Isn't that
That's kind of scary.
and
Yeah.
you
you're
sometimes will
right.
get some bonus if they stay for college or things.
Yeah, that's true.
But really now it's like, wow, I really only had my kids in my home for just a short period of time. And on the way back from Florida this last week, we got to Florida. Anybody out there from Florida? It was beautiful. And then we came back here, it was 30 degrees.
Yeah.
But anyways, in the airport, there was these 2 older women talking. And this one was saying, yeah, I got to be a stay-at-home mom for 17 years. It was great. And now she's doing a career of sorts. And she said, but you know, that was my biggest job I ever done. I was creating and training good human beings.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it just, I almost interrupted and said, I love that. That was so good because that's what that was the privilege we had to do.
Yeah.
Is to train and raise them for a short period of time.
And that's such a good note to end on because, like as you said earlier, that relationship, you know, step back
key.
and overall, you want to have that sweet relationship with your kids. You want to have the good memories.
Absolutely.
You want, you know, that's what you want them to look back on and
Right.
remember.
Take some pressure off your plate and build relationships.
Yep.
So
Always.
enjoy your humans,
And we have,
right?
we'll link some interesting articles and all that good stuff too.
Absolutely.
But, yeah.
Give us a
Have
call.
a good summer.